realized years later that their minerals in Mali actually belonged to France. Respondents, presentation 1. Please come over, or you can be taken the PA. She can still respond from there. Come so that the whole world knows you are making a response, and kindly be brief. Engineer also, you'll be coming, be brief, and then Dokirui in that order. Meanwhile, as they come, when we go to the next bout, Dr. Nelima will come first. We have a prof who is feeling unwell and she can't sit for long. She will be next. Then this great teacher here will be third. Now, apart from those three, the rest of the presenters who are yet to be identified, kindly register with Dr. Orawo. She just seated there. We want to make arrangements for the second plenary. Kindly, those of us who are presenting and are not among the three who have been mentioned, please take stock to Dr. Orawo, just seated there, so that we make arrangements for the next. Yes, she's there. Now, please come here.
Okay, I'm going to respond to the concern of Professor Ngole and Professor Kamar on the results when it comes to the consumers, especially at the local levels. When I was in the field, this water utility is managed by a company we call Nawasco. And I was also working under their permission with their technicians in the field. So what is there is just general knowledge that is known about the geology and the problems of water quality in Nakuru. But when it comes to the users at the local level, it being a utility managed by specific people, it becomes a very sensitive issue, such that the results are there through the research and what is known. But now to release this information to the users is now a bigger collaboration with the government, that is the governance, the stakeholders, as to come in, so that there can be an agreement of how to take this information to the local people who are relying on the water sources. So at the moment, it is very difficult. The information is just within the water provider, but the people who are using the water, the local people, do not have access to this information. But now through the GIS, and now also through publishing and everything, the information will be online, will be accessible through the internet and everything. And now when you look at, they have several well fields, and these well fields are located in areas where people are living. You'll find, for example, these 6 boreholes I was looking at, there is a connection such that they withdraw water from each one of them, and there is a collection at the end point. But where these boreholes are located, there are people who are staying there. They have opted to connect directly. For example, in one borehole, where people are in that area, they have connected, they are using that specific water. But once this data is published online, especially that mapping system showing how the levels of these parameters are varying from, for example, from this specific bore to that specific bore, someone can make a decision at that local level that I'm going to connect water for my own use for this bore because the levels are a bit different from this one. But now public awareness education is not there. Is that the water utility has to agree with, for example, the county government and everything, so that now they know how to move to the people to release the information. So there is still that problem at that specific level. Then, Professor, I did not get your name. You were talking about the GIS, how it was used to collect data and to analyze. The work of GIS is mainly spatial analysis, or just mapping of data that is kind of located in different geographical locations. So the work of GIS is just to map, and then through that mapping, it has a system. It is a computer system itself with the softwares and everything. Then you feed the information that you are getting from the analysis, and through that computer software, through the GIS software, you are able to kind of come up with this output in form of those graphs or in form of those graphs showing what is happening at this specific place and what is happening in the second place in this specific boreholes using that analytical data from the lab. The GIS is supposed, it can show how that specific borehole is related to the other one, is related to the other one.
Wow. Clap for this presenter. Thank you so much. Engineer and biogas, Dr. Samiko is keen that she hears you mention cow dung. Okay.
Okay, thank you once again. And now I have around 5 or 4 questions, and I think the first two the response is going to combine. One of them is the methane. There was a concern that methane is a little bit lower than carbon dioxide even after scrubbing. And the second one was, do we do this scrubbing in homes? Now, the first response, you see the main problem that was associated to this biogas production that maybe made this necessity to arise of scrubbing is that it's very bulky, such that maybe for a certain volume of the total biogas, you are going to have 70% to 80% CO2. So, and mostly if you see this biogas that we use in homes, it is being used on site. So that we have a problem. You cannot produce biogas at this site and then maybe use it on another place. Now, we are trying to address this one so that even if you produce biogas, you can be able to compress it so that it can be used in multiple places, so that maybe if you have your farm and your home located differently, we don't have to transport the dung, as we have called it, so that you can produce it in the farm and use it at home. So that's the main reason why this scrubbing is necessary. So for the second one is, do we have this scrubbing in homes? So the response is again the same. We are using it on site. So we don't really need this scrubbing, but the main one is to reduce the bulkiness. So the other one was alternative sources, which are more clean than the other. So recently, we have biomass, which includes cow dung and other wastes. Now, maybe we haven't tried to explore all of them. Maybe it's a good research point to look at it from that point, to try and see which kind of biomass is going to produce more than the conventional one. At this moment, conventionally, we rely or over-rely on cow dung. So maybe we are going to try and test the various types of biomass to see their variations. The last one was about the end product of this biogas, whereby we were stating greenhouse gas emissions. Now, for this response, if we have looked at various researchers, primarily the US, whereby they say where we have cow farms, there is emission of methane, whether there is burning or no burning or whatever, and CO2 from the cows. Now, the question that arises is about sustainability. Instead of having this CO2 or methane being emitted to the environment without any usefulness, now you can use it usefully. That's in quotes, usefully. So that once you emit this CO2 to the environment, you could have used it since it was to be emitted anyways. Okay, thank you.
A clap for this future scholar. Dr. Samiko, you can be sure when you will not be there, research will be going on, and we have future scholars in the room. Dr. Kirui and Dr. Wanyonyi can respond.
Thank you. I'll try to answer. I had several questions, but I'll try to answer them without repeating myself. Professor Gole was concerned about this aligning themselves, leaving Russia, France, and then you are now moving towards Russia and China. Is it not like moving from a frying pan to the fire? Well, yes and no. Yes, because even during the Cold War, there was what was called non-aligned movement, where countries were saying, we are not East and we are not West. Because they were saying they have their own unique problems, which do not necessarily align to the big power politics. But maybe it could also be an issue of choosing a lesser evil. You are comparing the kind of relationship that is existing, and then weighing it against maybe another one that may be better. But that is not to say, actually the cartoon of the Russian president is more of what people are saying, especially because of the presence of the Wagner private military group in the Central African Republic. And of course, Russia again has been very vocal, especially to warn ECOWAS against attacking Niger, because according to Russia, that was unnecessary, which again was kind of advantageous if you have to look at it, because ECOWAS, I don't think, was doing it actually as ECOWAS, but mostly because of who are behind ECOWAS, especially in terms of funding and especially in terms of interests. So I would not say that, shaking off French ties, they shouldn't mean that they should go towards Russia or China. They are supposed to look at what works for them, because you can as well be non-aligned and work with anyone as long as it is working for you. Somebody was also talking about how does it apply to Kenya, China, friendly, whatever. Okay, somebody was looking at, when we were looking at Francafrique, how does that apply to Kenya? Of course, one thing that I would want to mention about neocolonialism is that it is not something that you expect it to be discussed like openly in the TV and then it is very open. No. It is going to be very subtle, and of course, for example, the language we are using now, we are using English. This is actually colonialism, but when you talk English, it doesn't look like, when you have good English, you actually seem to be polished and well educated. But who came up with that model? It is a Western neoliberal model, where English is perceived perhaps as better than Luya or whatever it is. And many other things that are, in mode of dressing, architecture and everything. So they may not be pronounced and so on. These things are, if you go to a supermarket, kuna hizi vitu za kuvalisha nguo, for example, they're going to look like white men. Have you ever found one that is like you? No. Colonialism. But it is going to be attributing, it's going to be attributing lightness to beauty. And that's why we have light, skin lightening cream, and not a cream that helps you to be darker. So it's going to be very nuanced, it's going to be very subtle, you cannot actually realize it, of course, unless you study it like in detail and so on and so forth. So I don't want to go into the details, but there are a lot of those things out there. Now, in terms of how does it apply to Kenya? Well, there are a lot of things that when governments come to place, and I don't want again to go into details, we are not in an isolated place. As a government, when you come to power, for example, you will have to work with partners. Somebody was asking for Anglophone. You've talked about Francafrique. What about Anglophone? How is it related, especially now, to Kenya? Now, the king was here the other day, and the question that was in the mind of many people was, are we supposed to be asking for reparations, or we should be asking the king for apology? Now, around 2013, you all know what happened. There is a book that was published by Elkins, the British Kulak in Kenya, which partly helped the Mau Mau get the reparations they got around 2010, 2013 there. Of course, from there it has set pace, and some other ethnic groups, are trying to put up legal teams to try and ask for reparations. But the question again becomes, even if you ask for reparations because of the, for the brutality and all that, what does it mean then? Are you going to say now, once you pay me, then that aspect of you being guilty of colonialism is over? So I think for me and where I stand, it is more to do with apology. So questions to do with whether we were supposed to be saluting the king, for example, with a red carpet. They may look very unpopular, but those are questions perhaps we should be asking ourselves. Now, for countries like Zimbabwe, for example, where Robert Mugabe was leading, he didn't see how, for example, the white settlers are supposed to be, the government is supposed to buy land from the white settlers when they had actually annexed it by force during colonialism. So for him, he said that it doesn't make sense, and he told them to pack and go. But because of the big boys and the geopolitics, again, that we were saying, sanctions and so on, we all saw how Zimbabwe went. So it's about playing your cards well to ensure that you don't destabilize the whole system. Now, in terms of Britain, Anglophone, Britain is going to give its former colonies a little bit of space in terms of generally running their things. They are not very controlling, if I may put, the way the French are. The French, I think, because of their policy of assimilation, where they literally kind of want people to adopt into everything, the Paris style and everything like that. But for Anglophone, it doesn't mean that we are actually not in this mess. Somebody talked about, could we be having an MOU that we are not aware of? Sessional paper number 10 of 1965, for example, and even our own independence constitution, 1963, is going to guarantee the issue of private ownership of property. Now, at that particular time, for example, the settlers had taken large chunks of land, but we have captured the independence constitution, which is supposed to be a constitutional framework that is going to lead us to independence. But in there, we have actually talked about respecting the rights, including the right to ownership of property, which again, of course, is what led to the colonial masters, for example, or the settlers in Kenya to be compensated by money, of course, which the donors and the West gave as a loan to the government of Kenya, independent government of Kenya, to actually pay settlers so that they can go back. But you see, you are paying somebody who had actually taken land by force. So it's a matter of weighing the size of your opponent and seeing whether you want to go ballistic and face the consequences, or try to be a little bit diplomatic and see whether you can get some gains. Moses Muga was concerned about, he was asking, now, this issue of Africa, is it time we have an African currency? Well, I agree with you. Perhaps that is the time to have an African currency, but it is normally not that simple. Normally, we start with free markets first, where we have a free kind of a free market economy where we can trade freely. We remove taxes. I'm happy that many African countries are seeing the need to have visa-free continent. I am very hopeful we are heading there now, meaning that in the next few years, many countries in Africa, you will not need a visa to actually go there. And it doesn't make sense, by the way. So it's a direction, but before we reach to the currency level, it's of course there are politics and so on and so forth. And the question again in terms of, do you think, the US, for example, as a hegemon, Russia and China on the other hand, do you think they will be happy with Africa having an African currency? And will Africans be Pan-African enough to actually have the political will to actually have a single currency? Because there are also challenges to do with single currency. One currency, because it depends on the economic developments of countries. And you will have to look at how the euro, for example, is implemented and stuff like that. Lolelea, I'm almost at the end, was asking, sometimes the military is necessary because even civilian rule fail. Well, I agree with you that because of the frustration, sometimes people can support military rule. But normally the question is, or from what we have seen in the studies, it is not always, it's not always a guarantee that military rule will kind of have better leadership. And you don't have to go far away, you just have to look at African countries. The military will be very popular, and people will support them at the beginning, but normally they will rule with an iron fist. Of course, the military, because the larger disciplined forces is not trained for civilian leadership. So that's where the challenge is. We have a few cases of benevolent dictators. Muammar Gaddafi is a key example, where Libya was doing very well and so on. of course, before US, Russia, and UK did their thing there. But those are very exceptional cases. But normally, the military is not very good for leadership. Maybe for transitional purposes. That's how we look at it. But as I end, I would want to say that democracy, in this paper, we are not trying to say that democracy is actually the way to go. Remember, even the whole idea of democracy is because the US emerged as a winner after the collapse of the Berlin Wall. There are alternative voices, China and Russia, for example, where in exchange for economic prosperity and the people being given everything, perhaps for free or subsidized in a form of a state-driven policy, economic policy and so on, you lose your freedom. Right? That is the concept. So you have to choose. You are choosing between losing your freedom of the individual, for example, and then have the state have this big control over everything. In most cases, it will actually lead to a faster economic development. Even when you look at countries which have advanced or before they went to democracy, whether it is the US or whatever, normally democracy is normally supposed to be for countries who have attained a particular level of economic development. Because democracy gives a lot of power to the people to decide in terms of votes and so many things. It works on a free market economy model. Thank you so much. Because of time, let's stop there.
Asante sana. Clap for this scholar and team. Thank you so much. We have to move on, but at least with a bit of housekeeping. Dr. Ria, you are going, have you established the online presenters by now? Not yet. Dr. Rao, how many have you established that are ready to present? There are two. There are two. We do it here. Okay. We want to try 15 minutes presentations from the next bout. Yes, yes, yes. We also hope the presenters have evidence of payment. Yes, yes. It is taken. And so we also want to change the leadership. Dr. Samiko comes to chair as Dr. Oseko rapporteurs for the next bout of 3 presentations. Albert, have you received any so far, the online presentations? Albert, have you received any?
Yes, I have for Dr. Virginia and
You can indicate, maybe after the 3 presentations, then we can have the online presentation. Otherwise, Dr. Samiko, then Dr. Oseko. Yeah. Dr. Nelima is already there. I think she's presenting. Dr. Ari, you had already registered yours? It is there. Doc, have you? You have. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
who they project their livelihoods online. And they have these YouTube channels, and they talk about how they live on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes they only do videos of what they produce. And I got interested because these were people who are doing what we teach in the Department of Family and Consumer Sciences and what used to be home science, education, and home economics. But they were doing it so naturally as if it was a very normal part of life. And I thought we were missing something as Kenyans because our family and consumer sciences departments have been narrowing down and changing names, and we've really gotten rid of much of what these homesteaders were doing. So my interests were picked from there. Now, we are all familiar, please go to the next slide. We're all familiar with I hope we are all familiar with the diffusion of innovations theory. The one that talks about how an innovation gets into the market, progresses on, and then it declines in the market. And that diffusion of innovations theory talks about 12 attributes of a product. And those 12 attributes of a product, please go to the next slide. I want to skip this for now. Those 12 attributes of the product are listed up there, which include things like relative advantage, compatibility, relative advantage in terms of, is this innovation better than what we have actually been using? In terms of compatibility, is it compatible or is it going to disrupt what we are going to be engaging in? When it comes to, when it comes to complexity, how easy or difficult is it to use? In terms of trialability, how can we experiment with this innovation before making a full commitment to it? How can we try it out before we can actually adopt it? With the observability, can we see the change? Can we see the outcome of what we are doing once we start implementing it? And then what is the impact on social relations? How does it affect the way people are relating together? In terms of reversibility, of course, sometimes we don't reverse everything in life, but can you stop when you need to stop and not suffer any consequences in terms of the investments you'd made? And in terms of communicability, how easy is it to communicate? And I was glad when yesterday's presenter was talking about data-driven e-learning. It becomes easier to communicate things that people can see, that people can relate to, and that people probably like or have an interest in. And then in terms of the time required, how long does it take you to implement it? For these homesteaders, I discovered, for me personally, because this was a personal journey for me, the time it took to implement them was the time I needed to acquire the ingredients and maybe the equipment I needed to use. And I had a bit of time to plan ahead before I actually started doing what I did. In terms of risk and uncertainty, what are you risking by implementing those innovations? And how certain or uncertain are you that they are going to work? And I'll talk about examples of how I encountered that. And then in terms of commitment, the effectiveness with modest commitment. I didn't have to go and break a bank to buy the ingredients or the equipment I needed to use. And then modifiability. Sometimes when we encounter innovations, can we modify them to suit our local context? So that was my journey for that time period. When I saw what they were doing and I was interested in what they were doing, I actually went on to do some of the things. Please move to the next slide. I want to go back to the theory of diffusion of innovations, because after looking at those 12 attributes of an innovation, it means that whatever innovation you are trying to adopt should at least convince you by pointing out the benefits of that innovation, whether it's monetary, whether it is values, convenience, time saving. Of course, ensure that the innovation is easy to understand and ensure that they provide a lot of opportunity for trying things out before you commit. And then, of course, sharing the experiences of other people that have used the innovation. Now, I've just been told that I have about 5 minutes since I was informed to finish, and I don't want to finish and then have to be stopped and then have to come back and start again. So please, let's go to the findings and to the research methodology. Please, the research methodology. As I've said, it began as a personal journey. At that time, I needed to focus on keeping sane and busy and learning useful things so that I'm not wasting bundles and time. And then, of course, when I discovered these people, I started trying out some of the things that they were doing. And eventually, I actually subscribed to some of these channels. Now, when it comes to the findings, I discovered that a lot of science is actually going on in people's homesteads, which is a good thing. People are implementing practices and processes that other people are using in other places. Now, mind you, most of these channels were either in the US or in Australia and other developed countries. I did come across a few Kenyan channels, but they were talking about what I already knew, so I didn't focus on them. Now, please go to the next one. And I have said this research, kind of research that I did was replication, because it's part of action research, except I didn't go out into a field somewhere to do the action. I did the action in my own kitchen at home. When I was leaving the house this morning, I was debating whether or not to bring some of those products I had made, and I realized if I did that, I would run out of time. But please go to, the outcomes for personal development. For me, I developed personally, and I'm sure anybody watching those YouTube channels developed personally. I learned skills. I learned to accept that what you know and what is available to you locally is good, and you can make use of them, and you can improvise and improve on them. I did things I had never done before. I used to love growing flowers. My flower garden has now turned into a herb garden. I grow a lot of herbs. I dry those herbs. I even learned how to make avocado oil at home, which is a very tedious process. If you use the cool, air-conditioned place for drying, it takes about 5 days. If it is warm, like the weather is today, it might take you 3 days. But then I used that avocado oil to infuse some of the dried herbs that I had made. And some of the things that I have made antifungal ointments that are very good for dealing with mashilingi. I made another ointment that there used to be a vet ointment called, this is my 10 minutes up, called healing oil. And for me, this ointment was really good because it was healing. I discovered after using it for some time, it can actually remove scars from old wounds. I was able to make a pain relief ointment using hot pepper and beeswax and oil, and you can apply that, and it's very quick in relieving pain. So I thought, as much as this doesn't look like a very scientific study that I went out there to, do it, it was just my own hustling at home and keeping busy, because at the time I was living with an elderly parent who was also unwell. So I needed time off, and this became my time off. These activities became my time off. So I also discovered new recipes. I got to see equipment that we teach our students about, but we've never been able to purchase because they are so expensive. Things like freeze dryers and how they actually work. Things like dehydrators. We have this sun, but when you use direct sun, you lose some of the benefits of whatever you are trying to dry. But if you had a dehydrator with a controlled temperature, you would get more benefits retained in whatever you are trying to dry. Now, who would have known that you could go to the butchery, buy animal fat like mafuta, and render that into beef tallow and use that tallow to make a moisturizing hand cream or a moisturizing cream for those dry legs. Now, I'm sure if we looked at each of our legs, some of us are suffering from those dry leg syndromes. But you can use beef tallow, and you can render beef tallow and clean it in such a way that by the time you're ending up with that ointment, it doesn't smell anything like beef tallow. I learned how to make soap. I would copy what they were doing, and then I discovered a software called Soap Calc, where you feed in the amount of oil you want to use to make the soap, and it gives you how much lye you need and how much water you need, and then you can make your own soap. So I did try one avocado oil soap, and it was very good. The beneficiaries of these products of mine so far have been my close friends and relatives, so I'm not commercializing them. But she's up. I am grateful to those homesteaders who actually provided the information to me. This, for me, the one recommendation I want to make is that as Kenyans, I think we are sitting on a gold mine. We have a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge. We are not showing the world what we can do in our local context. So why don't we look at what people are doing elsewhere and see how we can do it for ourselves? Let me end up there. I have submitted the slides, and I will submit the completed paper, and you can access it for further reading. Thank you for your attention.
Let's clap for her properly. Thank you very much. Discovery every day. So just look around yourself and you'll discover something. Science at home. Science is never ending. Now, at this time, I want to invite Dr. Richard Ocheng, who is online. And I don't know if he's hearing us, so that he goes online. 10 minutes, and then thereafter, we are going to keep our questions and bring them back after we have filled our tummies with the tea. So, yes. From the land of Matoke and Ginat butter. Yes. Professor Lynette Gohole knows that. We went to Chambogo University for a conference, and we came back 2 kilometers
Robert Darwin has created an equal power dynamics. It has perpetuated racism, and it has also created socioeconomic inequalities in this particular continent. This is important to appreciate because we are told that we are primitive and we have less evolved. We have not fully evolved to people or to a race that can maybe be appreciated in what they are doing. And you may ask yourself, why do we indicate that, or why do we draw these examples from Charles Robert Darwin, and why do we accuse him for this? If you revisit the eugenic movement in US, and one of the things that you will be able to appreciate is that during that particular time in the early 20th century, there was a project to ensure that the less inferior human beings or race was eliminated. And this was an approach to enhance or let me say to quicken what we call the process of evolution. It was a move to fasten the process of evolution. And during that particular time, those who are considered to be less superior were eliminated from society. Those who had difficulties, challenges, disabled, etc. And in 1906, we have a case of the Otto Benga who came from Africa and was put in the Bronze Zoo with the apes. And to them, the reason why this person was put amongst the apes is because the whites, and especially the president of the National Museum of History, consider this person to have less evolved and was still in the same class as apes, and therefore was not fit to be amongst the human beings. Whatever I'm talking about is based on a study that was carried out, studies that have been carried out across Europe, US, and partly in Africa. And we contributed to this. And if I can draw your attention to a study carried out by the Discovery Institute, there was a survey that was done, and it wanted to look at the impact of Charles Robert Darwin's theory on the place of God in the society. And what was established was that they said that 65% of the atheists said that the theory of Charles Robert Darwin makes God less likely, while the agnostic indicated 43%. And then Americans who were asked whether they think that maybe this theory disapproves the uniqueness of human beings, because for you to appreciate the place of a human being, first of all, you have to appreciate that they are made differently. They are different creatures, and they did not really evolve. Because if we're talking about evolution, and we can be equated to the apes, or we can be considered to have evolved from to be existing in the same cadre or the same level as any other creature that we come across, then we are not important. And in this study, the atheists indicated that 69% did not approve human uniqueness, 60% of the agnostic are the same, and America 45% indicated that human beings are not unique. And this is very important because it is that uniqueness that will make us appreciate the specific qualities of human beings. But now, what is the impact of complex design in nature? If you appreciate the existence of complex design, what I call intelligent design, then you'll appreciate that human beings are unique. They are designed, they never evolved, and therefore they are in a totally different class, and they have a place in this society. And amongst those who are interviewed, 58% indicated that if you appreciate intelligent design, then God is more likely. And this is something totally different, because if you go into literature, I don't have time to go into details within the 10 minutes, then you'll be able to come across several literatures that indicates that the theory of Charles Robert Darwin pushes us towards being considering God to be less likely. Now, the theory suggests that human beings share a common ancestry. That is, we originated from the same point. We are components of the tree of life. In the intelligent design, we indicate that We are special creatures, and for sure, we do not exist in the same class as anticipated or as uh, proposed by Charles Robert Darwin. But now, what happens when we look at the scientific materialism and atheistic influence? The spread of scientific materialism emphasizes that everything that we see in nature is as a result of two things. One is a chance, and the other thing is necessity. And therefore, these help to cement their atheistic belief. If we do not believe in the existence of intelligent design, then one of the things that we'll never appreciate theistic beliefs. And the emphasis on empirical evidence and natural processes in scientific education make us reject religious explanation. And therefore,
5 minutes.
Pardon?
5 minutes to go.
It's okay, thank you. And for us to really know that we are intelligently designed and we never evolved, I would like to present a simple example of a nanomachinery of life. There are quite a number of them at the level of a single cell. There are quite a number. And if you look at the display or whatever I've displayed, if, for example, I share this photo, but I did not label it, then you will not appreciate that whatever is displayed is a molecular machine. If you study it keenly, then you will find that it mimics what human beings create. We have the propeller, we have the joint, we have the hook, we have a bearing, it has a bush, it has a stator, etc. And it is this particular component that enables bacteria to move through liquids in search of food or away from the predators. And it makes 100,000 revolutions per minute, something that even the vehicles that maybe those who are in attendance in this conference, their vehicles cannot make that. These are very complex machinery. And studies have been carried out to check whether this particular machinery could have evolved through stepwise evolution process. And the knockout gene experiment, it has been established that when you remove, it's made of 30 proteins. If you remove any of the proteins, then it stops to work. That implies that all the components must have existed from the very beginning to make it function. So these are an example of what we call irreducible complexity. Now, in the human life, again, we can draw quite a number of examples. We can study the DNA. Studies have been carried out, and we have several nanomachineries in life that depicts that they never evolve, but they are a result of intelligent design. So when you carry out such studies, then you come to the conclusion that for sure we did not evolve as human beings, and therefore the challenge that Charles Robert Darwin gave us to demonstrate whether there is any organ in life that never evolved, and therefore this theory will be useless. Some of the examples are there, and I'll share a full paper with each and everything that I'm talking about. And I say thank you.
Indeed, Dr. Richard Ocheng, you have really done us proud. It's a blended conference. In the afternoon, we have Dr. Ruben Kigame as our keynote speaker. So I have been informed that we head to the NS4, take our tea, and hastily come back so that we catch up with the presentations that we have. We have quite a number. Members, let's appreciate that we have quite a number of presentations. Let's clap for ourselves as we walk out.